All right, so now we have our model in place and our application DB context in place. The next thing we're going to need to do is actually create a migration. This will be the first migration because we've never created one before. But this is interesting because you're going to see a lot of magic in the tooling happen in this video. So we've got everything in place. There's no code changes at this moment. What we're going to do is go up to Tools and go to NuGet Package Manager, but we want the Package Manager console at this point. This will give us a command line for typing in commands. And what we want to do is use the command add migration, and you'll use this a lot when building Entity Framework applications from scratch, greenfield development. I usually call this first one initial migration, something like that. And then after I've typed in add dash migration space, and then the name of the migration in single quotes, I'll hit enter. And it takes a second, but now it's looking through our entity model, looking for a snapshot which does not exist, creating the snapshot and creating a new file. As you can see here, it's called, has this crazy number. It's not so crazy. I'll explain to you in just a moment. And then underscore initial migration. All right. And then if you take a look here in the Solution Explorer, let's pull this out a little bit. There's a whole new migrations folder that's been added. Inside of it, here's that file that's currently open up in the main area. And then this application DB context model snapshot.cs. So what we're looking at, what was the first thing that's generated for us, what I have highlighted here on the right, is the actual class that inherits from migration. And you'll notice that there are two methods. There's an up and a down. This is when we choose to migrate up and apply these changes to our database. And if we don't like those changes, we can remove the migration and it will call the down. In fact, if you take a look at the output here, Constant Manager, to undo this action, use remove migration. And one of the things that it will do is actually call this down method. Let's take a look at the up method real quick. You can see here, there's this instance of the migration builder class. It will create a table. In fact, it creates two tables, right? It creates them and it sets the first table's name to orders. And then it creates a series of columns. So order ID, order date, total amount. Notice the order ID column, it also has an additional instruction that essentially makes this an identity column. And then it makes that same column into a primary key, and it gives that primary key PK_orders, much the way that SQL Server Management Studio would do if you were to use its tooling. Same thing with order item. Creates a table, creates columns, makes the order item ID into an identity column, and then it adds a series of constraints like a primary key primary key on order item ID, but then this is the interesting one. It creates a foreign key relationship between orders.order item and order items.order ID. Said that wrong, but the order ID field on both the orders and the order item table are now connected through this foreign key relationship. Furthermore, notice here that it applies this on delete referential action restrict. In other words, if you try to delete the order without deleting the order items first, it will not allow you to do that. So it sets that property. Finally, it creates an index on that on order item order ID. Pretty cool stuff. Okay. Now, if we were to remove the migration, it would just drop those two tables. Pretty interesting. So what's getting called presumably behind the scenes whenever we call Migration Builder is the DDL, the Data Definition Language in T-SQL to create tables and columns, indexes, and keys. All right. Now let's take a quick look at this application DB context model snapshot. Its job is merely to record the current state of the model so that in the future, when we execute add migration again, it will be able to compare the current state of the model versus the previous state of the model when we actually called initial migration. So, or rather add migration. So if we were to do this, I'm going to call it again, add migration, another migration. Okay. What will happen? Well, it's going to go ahead and create a new file, another migration, but notice how the up and the down are both empty. It's because we made no changes to our entity model between calling the add migration tool, command line tool. All right, so next up, we're going to need to actually commit this migration to the database, which the first time will create it.